this is your percents and proportions notes for the compass unit. Let's go ahead and talk about percents first. So percent of a number, we would take that percent, it changed to a decimal, so we move that decimal place 2 places to the left, and then we multiply it by that number to find the percent of that number. So for a discount, we take the amount, the number, and subtract it by the percent of the number. And then for tax or markup, we would add, because unfortunately they add that tax to it or they mark it up and it's going to cost more. So we have to add that percent of the number to the original price. So for this one, it's a discount, which means we're going to be subtracting. So we're going to take 50 minus, and then we take 50 times. Again, it's going to be our percent as a decimal, so 0.45, or just divided by 100. So when we take 50 minus, and this right here, if we multiply that in our calculator, it'd be 2250, and we subtract, we would have $27.50 that we would have to pay for our sled that's discounted. Yay, on sale. So for tax, we got to add that tax in there. Unfortunately, our tax is a lot higher than 5%, but let's go ahead and calculate. And this is going to be added to our amount. So plus 49.95 times our percent as a decimal. So 5% would be 0.05, and then we would add those two things together. So our tax is going to cost 24975, and you could round up. I'm going to round at the end. So $52.45. They round up, make you pay that amount. So go ahead and try that last one on your own. Again, marking up would be addition. So find your original plus the original times your markup to find the total that you would pay for that hat. So hopefully you took 30 plus 30 times 0.25, which ends up being 30 plus 750, or 3750 for that hat. All right, so for our percent change, it's actually the difference between your numbers divided by the original amount. So our difference here is going to be 20, and the original is 38 because we're going from 38 to 58. That's our new number. So 20 divided by 38 is going to give us 0.526, but that's not the percent. We have to then multiply it by 100 to get the percent. So it's 52.6%, and this is an increase because we're going from 38 to 58. We're increasing. So go ahead and try this next one. Again, find the difference and divide it by the original amount, the starting amount. Then multiply it by 100 to get your percent. So hopefully you found the difference of 43, and your original was 66. So you got 0.6515, and hopefully you remembered up, times it by 100 to change it to a percent. So 65, and I'm going to round up 0.2%, and this is a decrease. So hopefully you realized we're going from 66 to 23, so we are getting smaller, and that's a decrease. All right, so there's three different kind of percent problems. The first is something of, so this number is blank of a total, and that would be the percent over 100 that it's equal to. And then, or the part over the whole. So it depends on the wording. So 23 is what percent of 64? So that of means that's kind of the total. So the 23 out of the 64 equals what percent? So we can go ahead and do that on our calculator. 23 divided by 64, and then we wind up with, again, that decimal, and we have to times it by 100. So 0.359 times 100, and we'd have 35.9%. And then think about it and make sure it makes sense. Is 23 less than half of 64? Yeah. So definitely it should be under 50% because we know half of 64 is 32. So make sure it makes sense. Next, 51 is 93% of what? So of, well, we don't know our total. So the 51, and we don't know the total, so we put a variable. And then we can put our 93% over 100. So next we can cross multiply, and we can get 5100 equal to 93x. Divide by 93, and you get 54.84. So 51 is 93% of almost 55. So the next one, go ahead and try on your own. Use one of the setups there, cross multiply, whatever makes sense to you. Again, double check that answer to make sure it's legitimate, makes sense. So 17 out of, we don't know our total here because it's saying 220% of what, so that's your total, we don't know, is 17. So the is goes on top, the total of goes on the bottom, and then your percent over 100. Cross multiply, and then you'd wind up with 7.73. All right, let's talk about proportions. So we kind of did some of these above in a sense. So this rate, approximately $3 to every 1 dinar. So 3 over 1, and I'm going to label 1 over our dinar, money over dinars, equals, and then they give us 18 dinars there. So we're going to put it on the bottom because that's where my dinars are located. And we don't know the amount of money it costs for that. So then we can cross multiply. This one's going to be pretty easy. It's x equals, and we just take 3 times 18, and it's $54. All right, our next one, I want you to try on your own. Again, set up that ratio of $2 per every 1 bunch of grapes. So $2 on top. You could go the other way, but 1 bunch. So bunches, dollars over bunches. So go ahead and plug in your dollars into the right spot and cross multiply. Hopefully put $18 on top, x on the bottom. Cross multiplying will get you 2x equals 18, and so x would equal 9, which is 9 bunches since it's on the bottom. All right, let's move along to our word questions. And these are ones you're going to see very similar to on your Compass test, the practice test. So we have 40 Democrats. We have both Republican and Democrats on Capitol Hill here. That represents 70% of them present. How many Republicans were in the meeting? So 40 is going to be equal to the either 0.7x, you could change it, so this is one way to do it, or you could set it up kind of like that ratio of x over, 40 people over the unknown total. So we don't know how many people are there, right? So the amount that you have, the is, and the of, we don't know, equals your 70 over 100. So kind of like on the last page, you could set it up as percent over 100 equals your what you know is, 40 is 70% over the total unknown, and cross multiply. Or you could go this route. Either one is going to get you the correct answer. So cross multiplying 4,000 divided by 70, because it's 4,000 equals 70x, divide by 70, we would wind up with 57.14 people total at this meeting. But that's not the question. So make sure you read it and you answer the true question, which is how many Republicans? So this total includes the 40 Democrats. So there were 17 Republicans. We're not going to include the 0.14 person because that's not a whole person. So 17 Republicans. All right, next. Let's look at this question, very similar again to the one above. 40 reading questions, 20 writing questions. That's a total right there. She got 75% of the reading and 80% of the writing correct. So we need to figure out how many she got correct. So then we can figure out how many total out of 50. So 40 reading, let's split it up, and 20 writing. Of the reading, That 40 is our total. So we don't know how many correct out of 40, but we know that it equals 75%, so 75 over 100. And how many over out of 20, we don't know. And that was equal to 80%, or 80 over 100. So we could cross multiply, and we would wind up with 30 questions correct on the reading. And cross multiply, and we would get 16 questions correct out of the writing. So together, she got 46 questions out of the 50. And that would be a score of 92%. Okay, let's take a look at some fractions. So when they have the same denominator, it's really easy. You keep that same denominator and you just add the numerators. So here we would wind up with 8/7, and then on the bottom here, keep that denominator and subtract 6 over 6, or 1. When it's multiplication, you just multiply across. So it doesn't matter if it's a like denominator, because multiplying, you just multiply across. So 81 and 26. And we can't reduce that, so we're done. Same thing over here, unlike bases, still multiply across. And can't reduce, so we're done. Now division is, again, the same for multiplying or for unlike bases as it is for like bases. So what we do is we want to change it to become multiplication. Don't divide by fractions, it's messy. We multiply by its reciprocal. So times by 1/2, we would wind up with 3 over 4. Multiply across, oop, nope, 2 over 1. I didn't flip it, there we go. So 6 over 2, which is 3. So flip that second fraction, as I struggled to do there. So 8/5 times 2/3, multiply across, 16 over 15. Now for the adding and subtracting of unlike bases, that's when you have to get that common denominator. So times it by 5, times it by 2, you wind up with 15/10 plus 2/10, which is 17/10. Same goes for subtraction of unlike bases, or unlike denominators. Get that common denominator, and we would wind up with 24 over 20 minus 15 over 20, which would give us 9/20. All right, last thing we're going to talk about is functions, and we've done this before. So remember that this means to plug a number in. Just like if it was written like this, what would you think? Well, plug the 2 in for the x. So the same thing means when it's f of 2, we plug the 2 in for x. Same thing. So let's take a look at here. When we have y equals -3 up, we're replacing the x with a -3 and solving. So that would be 9 plus 2, which is 11. Now let's do it down below. Oh, f of -3. Well, f of -3 means to plug in -3 for x and simplify. 9 plus 2, oh, it's 11. So look, it's the same exact thing when there's a y if there were an f of x. So you could try those last few. You can try plugging 5 in, and I will go ahead and just post those answers so you can check and see. But it's the same thing. When it's f of, let's say we try the 5, then you're plugging 5 in for x. You're not doing any solving, you're doing simplification. So it would be 0. Okay? So it's the same thing as if it were a y. If you want to replace it, make it a y. If that makes more sense to you, then do that. But think f of x, we're just plugging that number in for the x and simplifying, not solving. So -3 minus 5, if we plug that for f of -3, we would take and simplify to get -8. So here come your answers. Pause, and then you can check. All right, so as you can see, we plugged in -3 for x, we plugged in 5 for x, we simplified. We plugged in -3, we plugged in 5, we simplified. We did the same thing down here, even though it's f of x. Plugged in 5, simplified. Plugged in -3, simplified. Look, it's the same thing, 0 and -8, 0 and -8, when you plug those numbers in, even when it's an f of x. So there's no subtracting on both sides, it's just simplification.